Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. On today's episode, we're actually going to be talking about one of the earliest musicals by Kern and Hammerstein. Have your tickets ready as we board the infamous Cotton Blossom, a Mississippi River showboat. Showboat is a musical with music by Jerome Kern and a book and lyrics by Oscar Hammerstein II. The musical follows the lives of the performers, stagehands, and dock workers on the infamous Cotton Blossom, a Mississippi River showboat spanning over 40 years from 1887 to 1927. One might ask, well, what is a Mississippi River showboat? Well, the Mississippi River showboat was a floating theater that traveled along the waterways of the Mississippi and Ohio rivers to bring culture and entertainment to the inhabitants of the river frontiers. Showboats were rarely steam-powered because the steam engine would actually have to be placed right in the auditorium, therefore making it difficult to have a large theater. The earliest showboats still in operation today can be found in Branson, Missouri, where the Branson Belle still takes passengers around Table Rock Lake, as well as the New Orleans Riverboat, which is the star of Tiana's Showboat Jubilee in both the Disneyland and Walt Disney World parks. The musical Showboat was first produced in 1927 by Florence Ziegfeld. The premiere of Showboat on Broadway was an important event in the history of American musical theater. It was a radical departure in musical storytelling, marrying spectacle with seriousness, compared with the trivial and unrealistic operettas, light musical comedies, and folly-style musical revues that defined Broadway in the 1890s and early 20th century. In doing research for her proposed novel, Showboat, writer Edna Ferber spent 5 days on the James Adams Floating Palace Theater in Bath, North Carolina, gathering material about a disappearing American entertainment venue, the River Showboat. Jerome Kern was so impressed by the novel and hoping to adapt it as a musical, asked the critic Alexander Woollcott to introduce him to Ferber in October of 1926. Ferber was at first shocked that anyone would want to adapt Showboat as a musical. After being assured by Kern that he did not want to adapt it as a typical frivolous, girly show of the 1920s, she granted him and his collaborator, Oscar Hammerstein II, the rights to set her novel to music. After composing most of the first act songs, Kern and Hammerstein auditioned their material for producer Florence Ziegfeld, thinking that he was the only person to create the elaborate production they felt necessary for Ferber's sprawling work. Ziegfeld was impressed with the show and agreed to produce it, writing the next day, "This is the best musical comedy I have ever been fortunate to get a hold of. I am thrilled to produce it. This show is the opportunity of my life." Though Ziegfeld anticipated opening his new theater on 6th Avenue with Showboat, the epic nature of the work required an unusually long gestation period and extensive changes during out-of-town tryouts. Despite worrying about the serious tone of the musical, and Ziegfeld opening with Rio Rita as his first production in his newly built theater, he was on board with opening Showboat once Rio Rita was able to be transferred to another venue. Showboat would eventually open on Broadway at the Ziegfeld Theater on December 27, 1927. The critics were immediately enthusiastic, and the show was a great popular success, running a year and a half for a total of 572 performances. The character Joe, who is the stevedore that sings Old Man River, was expanded from the novel and written specifically for Kern and Hammerstein for Paul Robeson. Reviewing the 1932 Broadway revival, the critic Brooks Atkinson described Robeson's performance as a touch of genius. It's not merely his voice, which is one of the richest organs on the stage. It is his understanding that gives Old Man River an epic lift. When he sings, you realize that Jerome Kern's spiritual has reached its final expression. After closing at the Ziegfeld Theater in 1929, the original production toured extensively. Showboat was revived by Ziegfeld on Broadway in 1932 at the Casino Theater, with most of the original cast, but with Paul Robeson and Dennis King as Ravenel. In 1946, a major new Broadway revival was produced by Jerome Kern and Oscar Hammerstein II at the show's original home, the Ziegfeld Theater. The 1946 revival featured a revised score, a brand new song by Kern and Hammerstein, and a new overture and orchestrations by Robert Russell Bennett, also introducing the famous Buddy Ebsen as Frank. Ebsen would go on to famously play Jed Clampett on the Beverly Hillbillies. Now, Jerome Kern unfortunately died just weeks before the January 5th, 1946 opening, making it the last show he worked on. Additional New York revivals were produced in 1948 and 1954 at the New York City Center. The Music Theater Company of Lincoln Center would then produce a brand new production of Showboat at the New York State Theater in 1966. The Houston Grand Opera staged a revival of Showboat that premiered at Jones Hall in Houston in June of 1982, and then toured to the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion in Los Angeles, the Orpheum Theater in San Francisco, the Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts in Washington, D.C., the Gershwin Theater on Broadway in 1983, and finally, the production also toured overseas at the Cairo Opera House in Egypt. In 1989, the Paper Mill Playhouse of Millburn, New Jersey, mounted a brand new production, which was noted for its intention to restore the show in accordance with the creator's original intentions. In 1993, Livent Incorporated produced Showboat in Toronto with Robert Morse and Elaine Stritch, both notable Broadway stars for their work in How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying and Company. In 1994, a Broadway production opened again at the Gershwin Theater, where it ran for 947 performances, making this Broadway's longest-running showboat to date. In 1998, Hal Prince's take on the show opened in London and was nominated for the Olivier Award in the category of Outstanding Musical Production. In 2016, a revision of the musical would transfer from the Crucible Theatre in Sheffield to the New London Theatre. However, despite favorable reviews, the production would actually close after 4 months. Showboat had also been adapted for film 3 times, and once for television. In 1929, Universal released the production in both silent and partial sound versions, and again in 1936, this time featuring 4 members of the original Broadway cast. In 1951, MGM released a somewhat revised Technicolor film version. The film followed the basic storyline and contained many songs from the show, but made many changes in the details of plot and character. However, the 1951 film would be the most financially successful and frequently revived of the 3 film versions. In 1989, a live performance by the Paper Mill Playhouse was videotaped for television and shown on Great Performances on PBS. With the continued success of the show, it was decided to adapt Showboat for live radio. However, due to network censorship rules, many of the radio productions eliminated the aspect of the plot. In all, Showboat boldly portrayed racial issues and was the first racially integrated musical, in that both black and white performers appeared and sang on stage together. Since the musical's 1927 premiere, Showboat has been both condemned as a prejudiced show based on racial caricatures and championed as a breakthrough work that opened the door for public disclosure in the arts about racism in America. As attitudes towards race relations have changed, producers and directors have altered some content to make the musical more politically correct. Showboat, more than many musicals, was subject to cuts and revisions within a handful of years after its first performance, all of which actually altered the dramatic balance of the production. The show still remains a timeless classic that helps celebrate the power of music, the importance of family, and the resilience of the human spirit. Although the production is no longer running, I actually will have links below where you can find memorabilia and merch related to the show. Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to today's video. If you enjoyed this, please comment on what you liked or disliked. I'd love to hear from you. And if you want to see other videos like this, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe. And until next time, that's a wrap.